Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's so exciting to have a full room here tonight. I'm really excited that you could join us today for On What It Takes to Heal. My name is Alex Elliott. I'm the Director of Campus Experience and Events here at California Institute of Integral Studies, which, if you do not know, is a nonprofit university located in San Francisco. I want to welcome all of you who are here in the room and also welcome all of you who are joining online from different places all over the world. Before we get started, I want to set some expectations, do some introductions, and help everyone have the best time tonight. As a representative of CIIS, I want to begin by acknowledging our debt and gratitude to the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original peoples and continual caretakers of what is now known as the San Francisco Peninsula. CIIS's campus is located on the traditional unceded lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone. This acknowledgement is a single small step towards being in deeper connection and relationship with Indigenous tribes and organizations in our own community. And it doesn't really begin to acknowledge all of the native lands, languages, and territories where you might be watching from right now if you're online, or where you all live and work every day. By taking this time to acknowledge the land and the people, we invite and encourage you to learn more about Native communities near you, and most importantly, to be in community with them, to hear their stories, and to support their work. If you're not sure where to begin, we always recommend native-land.ca as a starting resource. We will have a live Q&A after the conversation this evening. Since this is a hybrid event, we have a hybrid Q&A process so that our online and our in-person guests have an equal chance to participate. So those of you here in the room, you probably saw those little QR codes on your chair. That links you to the QR form. The Q&A form, online, you'll find that same link in the description underneath the video. We will be handing an iPad to the presenters so they can get through as many questions as they can that were submitted through that form. And we may run out of time, so we'll try to get through as many as we can. This only applies if you're online, but if you are online, chat will be enabled during this event. Please note it is not being moderated, and as you can see, our presenters cannot see that chat. If you choose to participate, please be respectful and avoid any language that could be offensive or insensitive to others. And you can turn that chat off at any time, and we really encourage you to do it if you find that it negatively impacts your experience in any way. Now, the thing we're all here for, let me first introduce our presenters, Prentis Hemphill and W. Kamau Bell, and then we'll get right to their conversation. W. Kamau Bell is a comedian, author, and filmmaker. His CNN docuseries, United Shades of America, won 5 Emmy Awards, and he was awarded a Peabody for his docuseries, We Need to Talk About Cosby. He is most proud of his Emmy Award-winning and TVA Honors Award documentary, 1000% Me, Growing Up Mixed. Prentis Hemphill is a writer, an embodiment facilitator, political organizer, and therapist. They are the founder and director of the Embodiment Institute and the Black Embodiment Initiative, and host of the podcast, Becoming the People. For the last 10 years, Prentis has practiced and taught somatics in social movement organizations and offered embodied practice during moments of social unrest and organizational upheaval. They have taught embodied leadership with Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity and generative somatics, and served as the Healing Justice Director of Black Lives Matter Global Network from 2016 to 2018. Their work and writing have appeared in the New York Times, the Huffington Post, and the Huffington Post. They are a contributor to You Are Your Best Thing, edited by Tarana Burke and Brené Brown, Holding Change by Adrienne Marie Brown, and The Politics of Trauma by Stacey Haynes. They live in North Carolina on a small farm with their partner, child, and 2 dogs. And now, let me turn it over to Prentis Hemphill and W. Kamau Bell.
How was that?
Sweet.
Okay.
Hi.
Are you used to people cheering when you walk into rooms?
No.
I think you have to get used to that. It seems like it's going to happen more and more now that the book is out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you all for being here. Just for the sake of some accounting, who here is affiliated with this school? Raise your hands. Just for trying to see who's in the room.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be a lot more, y'all.
Okay, let's see. That's good. This is why I do these.
Yeah.
So only a couple of people raise their hands for people watching on Zoom. Yeah. So just wanted to know who we got here. So first of all, I feel like your book is amazing. I listened to it. It's hard. I feel like we talked about this. It's hard to say I read your book, but I listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I really know you now. I'm saying what people say to me when they listen to my book. Now I really know you. And I think we have a few things in common, some obvious, some not obvious. One of those things is we both seem to have faces that people like to talk at. So you talk about in the book about how even though you'll sit on a plane and people start to divulge personal, deep information just on a plane ride.
Yeah.
And if I'm guessing the way I feel, it's like, I'm just trying to get to Detroit, you know?
Yeah.
What is it like to have the gift and maybe the curse of having a face that people like to share things with? Even though it's your job, but you're not always on duty.
Yeah. It's not the question. I love that question. My sister talks about it because I have always been like that. Mm-hmm. Even as a kid, I would just be talking to people and listening. Oh, that's so interesting. What about this? What about that? And she thought I was pretending for a long time when I was a kid. She'd tease me and she'd be like, you always pretend like you like to listen to people talk. I was like, I actually do like to listen to people talk. I get really curious. I hear a lot of stories. So I think probably it's my curiosity that's coming through my face. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I am deeply not curious. And I'm trying to be internal and still somehow my face. And I smile a lot, but I also have a very extreme serious face, but it doesn't seem to stop anyone from talking to me.
No, and I think there's, like you said, I think there's something about our faces, because I feel the same way that like I've always had this face.
Yeah.
People have always talked to me about things.
Yeah.
But now that I'm known to talk, people feel more invited. But then I also find myself in a situation where people I know don't know who I am. You were talking about things that happen to you on planes.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of a story that I've never told. I was on a plane one time sitting next to the kind of white woman you'd not expect me to get along with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A Fox News white lady.
Sure.
Not that she was that. I'm just saying that's the kind of person.
Yeah.
And she was nervous about flying the plane. And before I realized it, we were holding hands.
Oh.
So I could like help her. Because I was like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Next thing I know, it's like, oh, okay.
That's quite profound.
Yeah. So I just think I just realized there's something about me and you where people just feel like I can be close to this person.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a person that you would think I would want to be close to.
Yeah. And it seems to surprise them sometimes. People are like, I don't know why. I've never told anybody this. I don't know why you're doing it either, but here we are.
Do you think some of that comes from, because you also write about being a middle child.
Yeah.
Does any of that come from being a middle child and being in a position of having to listen and having to sort of like navigate, that middle space?
Probably. I think being a middle child, being a queer middle child, I think there's kind of a bridge thing about my way of being and my personality. I always feel like I can relate to people across a lot of differences. I don't assume that I can't relate to a lot of people. Even when I travel, I don't assume that I can't relate to people. And then I always end up making a friend.
Yeah.
My partner always talks about whenever we live somewhere, we go somewhere, I always find a coffee shop and make a friend. I will sit in a coffee shop and I will make like a lifelong buddy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that has something to do with being a middle child. But a middle child also to me is I'm both the person that listened and the one that kind of said the thing that no one wanted to be said. I'm like, shut up. Why are you saying that? So it's that experience too.
This question is selfish for me. The rest of these are for you, but this one's just for me. I'm an only child. Which I have I loved being an only child. When only children are like, I wish I don't relate to any of that. I wish I didn't wish I had nobody. I currently live in a house with too many people. I have 3 daughters and my wife. So it's it's 5 people. When I was growing up, it was just me and my mom.
Right.
And so I have 3 daughters, one of whom is a middle child.
Yeah.
What advice can you give to my middle child? So you thought it was going to be easy. You thought...
Well, I also have advice for the parents of a middle child.
I'll take that too. I'll take that too.
Which is listen to them, and give them space to be themselves and acknowledge the specialness of their space. So I think that's what I longed for as a middle child, to be like, oh, you're a middle child. The attention is always kind of like shifting away from you. I want to give you space. So I would mostly give that to the parents. I think to a middle child, you know, the thing I'm learning as I get older is how many concessions I make. I was just having this conversation with my partner about who in our house, like who can have the office, like who's gonna. She's like, she's I hope she's not watching this.
She's not.
She definitely is. But I
turn this part off.
Yeah. But as a middle child, I think I'm always like, no, you do that. Yeah. And then I'm like, you know. So learning to be like, no, I want to take up space, and I don't have to kind of concede it as something. I'm still learning.
So take up more space.
Take up more space. And then as a parent, allow more space to be taken.
Well, it's interesting because as an only child, I feel like I relate to my middle child because I'm like, I had the exact opposite experience you had.
Yeah.
So when you feel like there's nobody's like, you don't have enough space, I can be like, you don't have enough space.
Right.
I used to have all the space.
You're like, I had every ounce of space.
So I see what, so it's not in your head. I sort of often like, no, you're feeling correctly.
That's right.
There are other ways to be, and let's take a walk.
Yeah.
And get away from all these people.
That's lovely that you can see that.
Yeah, I think it's well, to be fair, also I call my middle child Kamau Jr. That's just a thing we do. Because we both brood. So thank you, one person.
It's appreciated.
Yeah, no, I like to acknowledge the one laugh. I'm going to read you a text I got from a friend of mine and see what your response is about this event. This is all mostly about me tonight.
This is hilarious.
I told you it'd be different.
I'm into it. Let's go.
So my friend Yolanda, you know Yolanda Hemphill?
Yeah, I do. Hi, Yolanda.
Yeah. So I got a text from Yolanda. I love that you're interviewing Prentis tonight at CIIS, and I wish I could be there. She's not here. Oh. And then she said, kind of surprised to see you in the touchy-feely somatics orbit, though. And then this emoji. And then it says, new jam, 2 question marks.
Oh.
What did I get myself into here? So first of all, for people, since there's not a lot of people from this school, I feel like it would be helpful for me, I'll put myself on the line to say, what is somatics by definition? And then what is it for you?
Sure. Well, how many people here are therapists? Does that increase the number of hands? Okay, great. How many people know what somatics is? Oh, well, yeah, because you're like, why else would I be here?
For the record, there are a few people whose hands did not go up. So
yeah, for sure. Wow, you know, I always say I've been doing this work for so long, and it never gets easier to talk about. And I think in part that's because of what we're talking about is so obscured in the world that we live in, and is also trying to give language to something that is almost unlanguageable in a way. Mm-hmm. But we can start with somatics, which to me is a canon, really, of practice and thought and teachings that are about understanding the body. You know, Thomas Hanna, who kind of coined the term somatics, used this soma, the Greek word for the body in its wholeness, to talk about our bodies not as kind of just these fleshy instruments that walk our brains around through our lives that we try to make pretty or use our bodies to do things, but the body as a whole place that we are and live from, that we act from, that we feel from, that we interpret from, that we're creative from, the body as flesh and bones and everything and ideas and all of this. To think about the body more broadly and all these practices that bring us more deeply into our feeling, our felt sense, that because our bodies can carry our stories, they carry our histories, our bodies sort of shape to our stories in a way. You know, we come in the world with bodies, our bodies we have very different bodies, and our bodies are also then shaped by the things we experience. And so we can carry stories through our behaviors, through the things we do and don't do. I talk about with folks that I've worked with, the way you might move your mouth or the way you move your hands, what you think is possible, like how wide can I move? How small do I need to move? All of these things are can be shaped by the experiences we have, and trauma is one of those things that can also inform how we live inside of our bodies. So somatics is a whole host of, I mean, there's dance and somatics, there's neuroscience and somatics, but kind of interrogating what a lot of us call this mind-body split, which I don't really use that language. And to me, you know, I use more the term embodiment these days because I love somatics and everything that has kind of been cultivated and created inside of somatics. But I also think this piece around culture and where we come from, you know, when I really look at culture and all the things we do, dance and sing and eat and love and worship and rejoice, and all of these practices and rituals and ceremonies that humans have done across time, to me, that is what embodiment or somatics is. People are have created rituals or used the technology of rituals and practice over time to move things through their individual and collective bodies, to ready themselves for transition, for seasons changing, for birth and death, that we've always done these things. But what we call the mind-body split, to me, I say it all the time, mind-body split to me is just a kind of enforced way of living in our bodies, to say that feeling, emotions, sensations are less important than what we can think or produce. And that causes us, and that kind of societal way of being causes us to be in our bodies and in our lives in particular ways, to discount what we feel and to discount what others feel. And that a lot of domination and exploitation is really built on the necessity for us not to feel and not to be seated deeply into our bodies, which I think is kind of the beginning of sovereignty and liberation. So in short, that's what somatics is and embodiment is to me. And I could say a lot more, but that.
Well, we can get into a lot more. No, I appreciate that. So for me, when I hear that, I think about the ways in which I am my body and I feel my body, and I everything you're saying makes sense to me. And then I think about the ways in which the world often reflects differently who I am in my body.
Yeah.
And how I have to navigate that difference.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so however you feel, like how you feel how I feel when I close my eyes and I'm just me, or if I'm in a room by myself.
Yeah.
Versus when I'm out in the world, and how people, is that a part of this too?
Absolutely. And it's an indicator. I mean, that feeling that I think maybe we have in different ways too, is also an indicator that something is deeply wrong. Because
wow, that really resonated over here. That was a deep It almost got churchy. We almost got an amen over there.
Yeah, because and I think that's important information for you to go, oh, this world is actually not constructed in a way that allows me to live safely in my body. The world is not built for me to take a deep breath. The world is not built for my nervous system to settle. That's an indication that something is deeply off. And I think that's, you know, to me, I think that is the design of oppression in a way. I think it is a structural thing. And the impact is that certain bodies have to live slightly outside of themselves. And that seems deeply troubling. It is deeply troubling to me.
It's funny, I was having a conversation with a Black man. For the person's story, I need to identify his race, although I don't have a problem identifying people's races. It's basically my career. But and he said, yeah, like, you know how in the pandemic people moved, some people moved to other places, moved away from, they found other places to live where they're like, oh, I don't need to be here anymore, I can be here. And it was a Black guy, and he said, yeah, I actually moved to Utah. And I was like, good for you. He's like, why'd you say that? Like, every other Black person doesn't say good for you when I say I moved to Utah. I was like, because I envision you having a lot more land and space and not having to engage with America the same way you had to engage with it when you were in Los Angeles.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like there.
That's
Not that there's no racism in Utah.
right, but you have space.
Yeah, but you have this. You have a buffer between you and the racism.
Yeah,
Which he had some money, so I'm like, you probably got a pretty big buffer,
right?
You know. So yeah.
I think that is actually a really important point because a lot of our work, the work that we do with the Embodiment Institute, for us, embodiment is about being embodied in our physical bodies, but it's also being embodied in relationships. It is a lot of us have to relearn how to be in relationship with one another, and I think we are inherently we are created through relationship. We are representative of relationship, and that also includes relationship with land and ecosystem. And we have a land project where we're actually doing some of this healing work on land and with land, in partnership with land. But one of the things, when we first got this piece of land, we had folks come out, and so many folks were like, I haven't actually been on land that I felt like I could relax on ever before. I've been in rural places and I felt like I had to be more on guard. This is one of the first places where I felt like I could settle. And that is a deeply transformative experience, especially for people, all sorts of people that have been displaced or been exploited on that particular land, which is where my ancestors come from. So that's a part of what we're talking about when we talk about, for me, when we talk about healing or somatics or embodiment, it has to also be thinking about the ways our relationships have been severed and we can't inhabit them in the ways that we might.
Yeah, before we came up, we were talking a little about how you used to live in Hawaii, how we had met there years ago. And I remember when I grew up on the East Coast, so I did not, or the Midwest and East Coast, so I didn't go to Hawaii because I was in California. And so when I moved out here, my wife, who grew up out here, was like, we finally went to Hawaii. And I remember going there and feeling like, this isn't doing for me what people.
Yeah.
I didn't feel relaxed and on vacation. There was something about it that I didn't feel like,
Yeah.
And then I did a couple of United States of America in Hawaii. And the first one we did was about how the land had been stolen and they never agreed to be a state and how Native people are exploited. And I was like, oh, that's what I was feeling.
That's what you feel. Yeah.
That's why I couldn't relax, because my blackness is too attuned to exploitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that idea about being the land and where you are on the land and whose land it is and what your connection is to the land really resonates with me. And that's what we were talking about Hawaii earlier. I wanted to talk to you about that because that's a place that you have lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you're on Hawaii and paying attention at all, you can't help but feel that at every turn.
Absolutely.
And especially someone who's like, you're not from there, but you want to live there and be a part of the community, then you have to be actively letting the community know I'm on the right side of history.
Well, you got to show up. I mean, my partner's from Hawaii, which is how I got there in the first place, because I had never been, and then some love happened, and then I was like, oh, okay, well, so I was not one of those people that had fantasized about going. I wasn't like, and then one day I'm gonna go to Hawaii. I had no idea that I would live in Hawaii, and then I did, and I actually feel it's actually such a special. I'm going to be there doing a book event in a week or so. Community there, my friends, we organized this event, but it's a place where I feel so much love and gratitude. It changed me profoundly, and I always felt unsettled, and it felt like that was the way that I was supposed to feel. If I lived there, is to live with that and it kept me kind of agitated. And when I came back here, I was like, oh, this agitation, I'm not numb to the agitation as much anymore, though the history is different here. I mean, my ancestors, I live in North Carolina, my ancestors are in North Carolina for many generations, a long time. But you can feel the unsettling. But it was a place, when I talk about connection to land, every friend that I had, every homie I had a place where they were in reciprocal relationship to land. They'd be like, oh yeah, I go here, or I'm here, or I'm at Uncle such and such. Everybody had a place where they were working and offering. And if you didn't have a place, it was weird. In my social group, it was weird to be like, oh yeah, I don't do anything.
I'm just here.
Yeah.
Just enjoying it.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
Unacceptable.
Yeah. That there's a certain responsibility you have to the land.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the big things that came out of your book for me, and it's funny, when I bring it up, I feel like I want to frame it in the right way. But there's a way in which healing can be seen in certain communities as being soft.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how that if you are engaged in healing, somehow that's not a strong practice.
Yeah.
That you're seen as like, oh, you gave up.
Yeah.
Or you're not hard.
Right.
You need help.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, and especially writing a book about healing, knowing that there's an audience of people from maybe your community who will read that book and be like, that's not a strong thing to do, or it's a little bit, or it's even like there's ways in which healing in this country can become like a whitewashed activity.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think it can be untrustworthy for a lot of reasons. I think one, what you're pointing to of being hard, it's sort of like letting your guard down.
Yeah.
And can I afford to do that? You know, and we're making these assessments. Can I actually afford to let my guard down? And I think the other part about it being whitewashed is that I think the way that we try to make healing this solely individual thing, you know, that we can experience all these things, all these collective harms and traumas, and that individually I'm somehow going to heal the wounds of massive traumas that my ancestors have experienced by myself, and I'm going to be able to complete that.
I'm the chosen one.
Right.
Like the Neo Matrix way.
Right. And we just like keep buying things. Okay, I'm going to keep buying. Maybe this will do it. Maybe this will do it. Maybe this will do it.
I need to find the perfect water bottle.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that makes it untrustworthy a lot of times because we can see, you know, you talk about feeling that unsettled feeling. We can go like, something's not right about this kind of healing that people are talking about. Something is missing there. So in a way, you know, I really trust that suspicion. Because I think the way that we have practiced and conceptualized healing has been in ways that really are easily maintain a certain status quo. And even when I was becoming a therapist, I mean, it was like the profession was something like 85% white women at the psychotherapist level. And then it was like 85% white men at the psychologist level. And then you're like, who is defining wellness?
And then they ask, why don't Black people go to therapy?
Right, right, exactly. So I think it's and I think that we can get into these habits around, you know, it's not safe to look in or look back perpetually, and so I never will. And that's when it becomes like, okay, now we're actually stuck in our habits and we're stuck in this assessment. And I was there. I mean, the fact that I am here writing, the fact that I wrote a book called What It Takes to Heal, if we went back 20 years, that person would be like, are you so for real right now? You know what I mean? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I did not want to be soft. I did not want to be vulnerable. And I am so squishy soft now. But at the same time, when I became softer, or I will say, when I knew how to soften in the places that I wanted to, I actually became much more powerful in other places. So it became this thing that there's more flexibility in movement. And, you know, one of my somatics teachers was a martial artist, and he would say to us all the time, the most powerful body you have is a relaxed body. Because from a relaxed body, I can do many things. I can do what's appropriate. From a tense body, I have a smaller range of things I can do. I can only do the thing I'm sort of bracing to do. But from a relaxed body, I have a lot more options. So there's something about my softening that made me actually feel much more powerful than the kind of habitual tension I was locked in.
I mean, do you find it true? I mean, or can you talk about the idea that, like, for a lot of impacted communities, which is a word I never thought I would use, but I feel like I'm trying to.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. It feels like there's not time to heal because you got to get through the day. You know, I gotta work this job that isn't paying me enough, and go to the other job that's not paying me enough, and then get home to take care of my family and put kids, you know, and da 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 da. But there's not like, you know, I mean, I would put myself in this category. I don't got time to meditate.
Right.
You know what I mean? Of like, I got these 3 kids, you know, they don't want to pay for no groceries. You know what I mean?
At
Like,
all.
At all.
Never.
Get annoyed when you ask them to. Kick in for something. But like, so there's a type of person who feels like I would love to have the luxury to heal.
Right.
But this system has been designed so I don't have the time to even think about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First, that's real. I think it's real, and I think it's, again, designed that way. You know, when I talk about oppression, is for me the concentration of trauma into certain bodies and certain communities, and the removal of the resource of time, space, whatever you might need in order to heal from those same traumas. That is the tension we were in. And at the same time, there are things that we do and have done that, to me, I think that's why it's important to say healing is not necessarily the expensive retreat, you know, where you go and have a whatever people be having, organic such and such, and, you know.
When you go to Hawaii.
Right.
Yeah.
But that healing is also the way that my grandmother touched my back. Healing is also, oh gosh, I saw this TikTok yesterday of this grandmother just walking through the field, just praying over her whole family. She had land, I guess their family, I don't know the story because it's TikTok.
Yeah,
but
it was 11 seconds.
I made up a whole story, and the story is,
you wrote a screenplay.
I wrote a screenplay starring this person's grandmother, but she was, it was land. It was their land. It was land, and she was just praying for her whole family. And I was like, in that, and I write too in the book about having a child and how my own experiences growing up kind of moved me away from intimacy and connection with people. Like when someone would come close to me, I'd be like, oh, retreat, you know, and in so many ways, I would pull myself back. I would kind of harden my eyes, tighten my chest. I'd move myself away from connection. And when I had a child, I really wanted to be available for that connection. And just in a moment, I softened my chest. Mm-hmm. I softened my eyes. I let myself stay open and kind of trembling under her looking. Mm-hmm. And that stopped the transmission of an intergenerational wound to the next generation. So I think time is a real consideration, and we are constrained in that way. And at the same time, if we, for me, the reconceptualization of what is actually a healing act, to me, a healing act is connection. To me, a healing act is bearing witness. It's feeling something that's real. And time is a factor and a non-factor in that. Mm-hmm. It is both. And I think we have to contend with that complexity. It does take time sometimes for us to circle into presence, mm-hmm. to drop into presence. But once you're in presence, that's the thing. And it takes no time at all.
And certainly, I certainly hear you when I think about like my family and when you say grandmothers, like there are ways in which Black communities have done healing work. And a lot of that was through like through the church.
Yes.
And not even the church as far as the religion part of it, but the community part of it.
Exactly.
Like it was a place to go.
Yeah.
And to not have to, and to sort of have a community that was not ruled by the system, a little decompression zone.
And it was community, absolutely. And it was the transformative principle at the heart of, I think about, I grew up going to church, and what's the whole premise in a Christian, I grew up in Baptist and Pentecostal churches. The whole premise is you can change.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
You change.
Yeah.
You're reborn.
Yeah.
It's a transformative, alchemizing thing. And I think just having a place where that is possible, mm-hmm. where we can bring something and change, and we can tap into something larger in order to source that transformation, and we do that collectively and together, that to me is the magic of those spaces, how I've experienced it.
Yeah, you talk about in the book, and I feel like I don't think we went to literally the same church, but like the churches where like there are people who are being affected, and suddenly they, I feel like in my grandmother's church every week, some Black woman stood up, caught the Holy Ghost,
fell out,
got carried to the back.
Yeah.
The fans that had like MLK and JFK on them.
Yeah.
This is old school.
You are not lying.
This is before Obama. Our two Black heroes were MLK and JFK.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But like this
that's
idea
right.
that people got taken over.
And that's somatics.
Yes. Oh, there you go. I guess I do know what it is then. Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started doing somatic body work, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
I've seen this before.
Yeah.
We called it something else, but I've seen this.
Yeah.
You fall out, or when it hits you, it still hits me.
You might babble a little bit or speak in tongues.
Yeah. That's embodiment.
Yeah.
How is it not?
Yeah. The one thing I want to definitely talk to you about in your book, because I feel like we have different ways of looking at this, and I would love to talk more about shame as a bad thing. Like, why is shame bad?
I don't think I said that. But
no. Okay.
What I did say.
Okay, I'll say. Here's my feelings
that's
about
what
shame.
I want to hear. Yes.
Here's my feelings about shame. And let me be clear. I'm always available to be corrected, so I'm not here to say this.
We're just talking.
We're just talking.
Yeah.
I just don't want to feel like I'm not. Here's what I'm not building a case against you. Is what I'm saying. And if I misunderstood, then please tell me that. I got a problem. No. I feel like shame gets a bad rap sometimes, or all the time, because people who feel shame then often say, "You made me feel shame. You're shaming me."
Yeah.
And sometimes we're like, "Yeah,
I am."
Like, just because what you have done, you need to feel that this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But hopefully, thank you again over here. Hopefully, just like any intense emotion, it can be a motivating factor for you to do better.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying you should feel shame all the time, just like you shouldn't feel anger all the time. You shouldn't feel happy all the time.
Absolutely.
But shame, like, I feel like what we had in this country for a long time, specifically thinking about like racism, is a lot of white people felt shame. And that meant we could walk a little more free for a little while.
Right.
And then they were invited to stop feeling shame.
Right, because it didn't. Okay. So here, that's important. I do think something is happening there around definitions too, and how words are changing. And so I think what you're talking about around feeling bad for taking an action, and the collective's like, that sucked and we don't like it, and feeling bad about that, I actually don't see anything wrong with that. I think it can be a deeply transformative thing. I think the part around shame is the absoluting that happens of like, you are fundamentally this person. That's one element of shame. You are fundamentally this kind of person. You are fundamentally a bad person. And so while that may coerce people into certain actions for a certain period of time, they won't stick, because shame ultimately impedes change. If I am fundamentally bad, then I cannot grow. I can't.
You can't be born again.
No, you can't be born again. Yeah. And in a way, there's a part of it is that some people will retreat into shame so that they do not have to change also. It's a familiar place to go to. So I don't use it only as like a neutral, like we're shaming and that's bad. I think shame is a place where change cannot happen. That is what.
If you sit there.
Yeah. Okay. And if we try to, if in how we're trying to create change or make change or coerce change in someone, we're kind of tugging on your fundamental, it's around belonging and exclusion. You cannot belong here fundamentally. Nothing will change.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I wish it worked in a way. I wish it was like, I'm gonna say this and then you'll suddenly go, right, I should change. Yeah. It just doesn't seem to work that way.
No.
I haven't seen it work, but I do think it's a tension between naming the action, being willing to name the action, the impact, even our frustration, our anger, all of that. And there has to be a thread of belonging that remains.
Yes.
And sometimes that is really painful for us to allow that thread of belonging because it hurts or it sucks. And so there always has to be that thread of belonging in order, I think, for the transformation to even be possible. Doesn't mean that people will do it. It's not a guarantee, but it's the only thing that makes it more possible.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like, so I'm sort of two minds about it. Like, first of all, I have known times in my life where I felt shame, but the person who was sort of inviting me to my shame, hey, Kamau, your shame's right here, has done it in such a way that made me feel like, now that I've shown you your shame, let me help you get through this.
Yeah.
You know, one of my best friends, I've told the story many times. She actually is attending school here right now.
Oh, cool.
Is the person who very key in my life was like, you're not doing a good job. Like your actions aren't matching your stated goals.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel shame. You must be wrong if I feel shame.
Yeah.
Like, no. I'm gonna sit here in this kitchen and work you through this.
Yeah.
And she did. So I know that, like, in my life, I've seen shame. And then there's the other part of shame that is like, at least if a person who's doing bad actions feels shame, at least for a little while, I can get through the world while they are shamed. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, I feel like maybe, the greatest thing that Martin Luther King Jr. did was made some white people feel ashamed.
Right. But they made us feel ashamed for a long time too.
Yeah, for sure.
So that they can move through the world in a particular
That's
way.
what I'm saying. Now it's your turn. But I also recognize that that's not transformative.
It's not transformative.
But then there are white people, like, I know there's the group Showing Up for Racial Justice, which to me feels like, you know that group?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay, of
yeah.
course.
Sorry, yes, I do.
No.
Yeah. I didn't mean to be like, what are you talking about?
No, I just feel like, do you know, yeah, maybe yeah. But the idea, of course, you're from here. But the idea that, like, that to me felt like white people who felt some level of shame about how they were relating to
and responsibility.
Yes, that's the key part.
Yeah, I think they feel responsibility and the willingness to transform.
Yes.
Which, yeah, I'm willing to. Yeah, there's some people that use the word shame and then toxic shame to talk about the part that is totalizing. But I think what we're talking, feeling guilt or feeling, that's yeah. I feel guilt. I feel bad about things I've done. I feel shame.
Yeah.
But I know when I feel like, oh, I'm not, I feel so ashamed that I cannot belong. I don't actually end up changing anything.
Yeah, I feel such shame that I can't move.
Yeah.
Or I can't move through this shame, and I say,
or I just don't belong. I kind of stay in this freeze state.
Yeah.
And a lot of us feel shame for things that are actually about power. Feel shame for our skin tone, our size, our hair texture, how much money we do or don't have. Sometimes there's that kind of shame that blankets people. Like, I actually can't belong because of these things, because to belong would mean that I were different. So there's a way that shame is used as a kind of social, it's like a threat and an organizing principle. Like,
I mean, I feel like one of my big jobs as a parent is to teach my kids how to not let other people put things on them that aren't there. You know what I mean? That are like sort of the idea of, like, if somebody says this about you, then it's true.
Yeah.
So how to sort of like, how to sort of like let that stuff roll off of you or just let it go past you.
Yeah.
And because I took martial arts as a kid, which you're talking about martial arts, I think about it as like, to sort of like, the idea is to, like, it's better to not be there for the punch than it is to have to confront it.
Yeah.
So totally. So I feel like so when I hear my kids tell stories about things that somebody said something, like I've told both my oldest kids this. My youngest is 6. She's feral. You can't really tell her much. But like the 13 and the 9-year-old, I'm like, you're never going to get in trouble for standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
Or for one of your friends. Like, you're never going to get in trouble with me.
That's right.
So the idea being that, like, I don't want you to be in a position where somebody, like, tries to, whatever that is, tries to attack you with words or something, and you feel like I'm supposed to behave.
Yeah.
Especially raising girls.
Right.
I don't want you to feel like that I want you to behave in all situations.
That's right. I mean? That's such a great lesson. My grandmother told me, get them low, get them on their ankles, take them down.
Yeah.
When I was young. So anybody messes with you, go low. You're short, so you're close to the ground.
You got low center of gravity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes we think of this healing work as turning, not we, but there's a way in which this healing work is talked about that it turns you into sort of like you said, so squishy that people can just sort of, that it feels like you might be taken advantage of more often. You know what I mean? Or that you won't ever, that it doesn't also, it's not about standing up for yourself.
I think a lot of people in the so-called healing space sometimes think that too. Yeah. They're like, I just have to always let things go by.
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually don't. I think going back to that point, I think it makes us available for intimacy and connection. And then it makes us great fighters too, where we need to fight. I actually wouldn't mess with me. I wouldn't.
Is that a quote you said before?
No.
You got to write that one down. Maybe that's the next book. I wouldn't mess with me is a great incantation. Yeah, I know me well enough to know I wouldn't mess with me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. My brain is going a million places with that. I always say that, like, I think about like people, like you were talking about martial arts, and you're talking. I call myself America's #1 Bruce Lee aficionado, non-Asian division.
Ooh, we've got to talk about that.
Okay, good,
I have
good.
a lot to talk about there with you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm down. And the idea being that, like, people sort of have this idea of Bruce Lee, but really the first half hour of every Bruce Lee movie is him going like, I really don't want to fight.
Right.
Don't make me fight.
Yeah.
I really don't want to fight.
Exactly.
I'd rather not do this.
Mm-hmm.
You don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
If you make me fight, the next hour is going to be me fighting everybody.
Right, I'm about to make a movie about how I whooped you.
Yeah. Then you're going to be a whole. So, and I think about it all the time. Like, it's not about it's about avoiding it, but also being prepared if you have to show up. You know, if you have to show up for yourself. Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about Black Lives Matter, because for many people in this room, that's a hashtag. It's a political issue. It's something they were maybe afraid of at one point, and they accepted, and they whatever. There's a lot, but you were in the middle of it in a way that most people will never understand. Yeah. I just want, and when I read the book, because I'm friends with Alicia Garza, I've interviewed Patrice Cullors, like I have been close and around it. And so as soon as you talked about being there for the creation of the actual organization of it, I was just like, whoo! Like, that is something that most people probably don't even understand or can imagine. You're right. And it's also such a compressed period of time. Mm-hmm. You know, in some sense, it's like this, we think of the civil rights movement as being like this long period of time, but we're talking about, it's a really small period of time, window of time. Absolutely. What are your thoughts on I know it seems like a lot of your book is about things you learned from that experience, that you then were like, okay, I've learned how to do things differently because of what I went through there. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I had a lot of theories, and then I had a lot of practice. Inside of that. Yeah, I had been a somatic practitioner. I had been teaching somatics. I was a therapist, and then I was doing it in what might be the largest social movement in human history. And not just not a hashtag, an actual. No. Yeah. No. No, that's what I mean. That's the thing. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but I really want to, like, this is not just the people who are like hashtagging on Instagram. You are working with the founders of the movement, trying to create infrastructure. Yeah. Trying to create results. Yeah. And also it becomes a popular thing for a minute, you know. Yeah. And that, was unforeseen in a way. Like, we were doing it before we knew that was going to happen like that. And to be doing healing justice work inside of it. I mean, it was like, what that meant at that time, there were chapters everywhere around the world, is that people were trying to address what was happening locally in their communities, and they were trying to address deaths, killings. They were trying to address what was happening in their chapters, because, what was happening, what people witnessed, it was like it's massive. It was just massive. And so people were assembling chapters and organizing, and they didn't know each other. And then who's going to do what? And so it was like 1 million organizations were sprouting and then trying to connect with each other. So there was everything that comes with that, comes with human beings. So, some days it felt like, from my position doing healing justice work, it was like looking into the vastness of Black pain. And it almost felt like it was almost something I could see. Like I could, out of the corner of my eye was just everything. And
I had to kind of start to pry my looking away from there because it was just there all the time. And that, yeah, it changes you. It changed me fundamentally. I'm a different person after that experience, but also there was so much beauty, like what people were creating that never got talked about in the media, the way people were holding each other that never got talked about. The tears, the love, the grief, the holding, the practice, I tell people, I've done somatics, you've been a somatic practitioner, you have an office, you see clients. I was doing practices with people who were in the jail or in the streets or with mothers who lost their children. Yeah. And it felt like doing that, you're like, this is also a historical thing. We're here right now, and there have been many times that this has happened. And it was always, I always felt visited by the past in those moments. So I think what this is not a BLM book, but I think one of the things I'm trying to offer here is that we don't even know that story yet. And we don't even know also the beauty and the pain of everyday people who are motivated, who are telling their stories, who are experiencing this real time. You don't even know the stories. There's so many people that were on the ground in their communities that were holding each other, that were building, and we just don't even know. And there's a beautiful story there of healing, of transformation, of connection, of grief, of love, that hasn't been told yet.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as you say, it's not, this is not, I don't give my impression, it's not a BLM book, but it is a book about a Black person who is living through history. And that was a part of the history you lived through.
It's true. And trying to learn. I mean, this was me going, okay, what did I see in that last period? What kind of tore us apart? And what brought us together? And these are kind of the lessons I've been like carrying around in my backpack the last several years.
I mean, and I'm not breaking any news, but I think part of what tears things like Black Lives Matter apart, I think about the Black Panthers, is the system goes, we can't let that keep going.
Absolutely.
We can't just let that, what racial justice, that does not help capitalism at all. So there's a part of this, like when you look at, I think about
that's a big part of it.
The Black Panthers, and you look at like the Black Panthers with 10-point program, and you're like, yeah, that's all great. But the system was like, we can't have that.
Can't have it.
Yeah. And I think that eventually the stories get told by people who say the problem was on the inside. Which it's humans are humans, and humans are always going to human. But there's also like the pressure from the outside. And
who's on the inside?
Who's on the inside, yeah. And who gets their way to the inside, and who came from the outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that story hasn't been told yet. We'll wait 30 years for that one.
All right. But part of that, embedded in that, and I want to sort of bring it back to that, is the idea, you tell a story of a Black mom who had lost, I think it was her son. And the thing that comes up for me, and I've talked to Black moms who've lost their sons, because it is not an uncommon thing, sadly.
Yeah.
But you hit on a thing that I've always sort of noticed, that there's this way in which Black moms, like within like, I don't know, like 24 hours of losing their son, suddenly become spokespersons for the movement.
Yeah.
And I'm always both impressed and horrified that you have to take that on at a time when you should just be allowed to mourn and be angry. But there's a certain amount of like, I think, responsibility these moms feel, but also sort of a way in which the community sort of turns to these moms.
Yeah.
It's like, tell us what to do.
Yeah.
And I really have always felt like that is just so much. Not every mom is built for that in the same way.
Yeah. That is, it's an interesting thing, because this is a story that is told over and over again. And it is always the question that I've had, or the experience I've had, of like, who holds that person, that mother, that girlfriend, that family member at night, who holds them that night? And do they, especially as a mother, hold the family together, and have to keep holding the family together when they've gone through something like that? And I think that is a lot of the orientation, specifically for Black mothers who I've known that have experienced that. You have to still hold everybody together after you have experienced such a massive loss. And I think there's something there for our communities to really understand. And in those moments, but all moments, who is holding the people that have held it together, who hold us together, who have held us together, who is holding, and do we even know how to do that? I think I think in those moments, it's the most extreme, most devastating example, but it is something that I see time and time again.
Yeah. We have about 5 more minutes of conversation, then we're going to questions. So if you want to get your questions in, I think there's the QR code, or if you're online, you can put your questions in, and we'll go to some audience questions. Let's talk a little bit about, in 5 minutes, I wrote a book about myself. It is nowhere near this book. I just want to be clear about that. But I did have to write about my dad and my mom, and there, I remember the fear of, like, my dad's like, I'm reading your book, and I was like, oh no, you were just supposed to buy it and put it on a shelf.
Right.
You were just supposed to be proud that I got a book published.
Right. He actually wanted to read it?
He read it.
Wow.
He read it. Yeah. That's for another event, or we can talk about that later. But talk about you become very aware when you're writing a book that's about your life, that at some point, like, oh, this is my version of events.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is not the truth.
Absolutely.
And also, sometimes, I don't know if this happened to you, people fact check you later when it's out in the world. You're like, like, my mom was like, that didn't happen. Okay. Look, lady. But talk about that, like the idea of, like, you write this thing. I always say in writing, you're supposed to write like the guilty parties will never read it. But then at some point you got to put it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I think I wrote that way. I tried to write honestly how I experienced it, because I was like, it's not the truth, but it is my truth. It is what I experienced, what happened, and what happened inside of me, especially. But in this book, someone was saying to me, I feel like you were really, they thought I was not as hard on some people in the book as I could have been. And I was like, well, I think the thing is, I'm only telling stories that I've done a lot of work around. I'm not telling a story that is unprocessed here.
That are still causing you sleepless nights.
No, yeah. I'm telling stories I've done a lot of work on. But also, I think what was important to me was, like, I wanted to feel my dignity in the stories, and I wanted other people to be in their dignity without protecting them too, without trying to coddle them or, like, take care of them in a particular way. But I think there's a dignity in everybody's story in a way. And so when I talk about my dad in the book, I'm telling the story to talk about abuse and what it does and how it keeps going and how it tears us apart. But, I think the work that I have done in particular is that I don't, it's not that I absolve him, I guess, in some way, but I understand how we got here. And that understanding is actually freeing for me in a particular way. In a way, too, because it has me, I'm clear about what to expect from our relationship now that I understand more.
Yes.
And so my understanding allows there to be even a dignity in the way that I write about him. Like, he is a human being. He is full and whole and human. And he's done a lot of things that hurt real bad. So there's that. But, we were talking about it back there. Sometimes people just don't want you to say nothing at all.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Just putting our laundry out there.
Yeah, and it brings and shame.
Yeah.
We're back at shame.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things with my own family that I've had to say to them is, like, when I write, I'm going to write from this place of holding people in their dignity. And at the same time, I don't feel like there's anything shameful in what we've experienced or what I've experienced. I don't feel shame around it. And in fact, I think that it can be helpful for people to not have to kind of tiptoe around their own stories and shame, not be willing to look at things because it's too shameful. It's a story.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying my story is the most interesting story. It is a story, but part of the invitation is to be like, there's information, there's wisdom inside of our stories, and shame doesn't have to keep us from looking at and contending with and feeling into the stories that make up our lives.
You got the iPad for the questions? Is that we're ready for that? Is there related to this? Is it scary to write a book that is ostensibly telling people how to heal?
Well, yeah. What do you mean? Yeah. I think I try to do a pretty good job of like, this is not the answer.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I'm honest with my publisher, I was like, this was the original title, the one that I came up with, and then I came up with another one, and they were like, no, let's go back to the first one. And I was like, I think that sounds too certain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a very bold title. It's definitely a title that people who are looking to heal will be like, oh, there's the book.
Yeah. But then hopefully they pick it up and then they go, oh, wow. Okay. I don't have any answers, but I'm also invested in the process.
Yeah. So here's a couple questions. First question's from Kristen. What first steps would you suggest for someone with a deeply felt sense of lack of safety in their body?
That's a great question, Kristen, because it's kind of a question that in a way answers itself. Because for me, when I think about, someone asked me recently, how would you work with a client that did not have a felt sense of safety in their body? And almost, the question was almost a little frustrated, like, I'm trying to convince them that it's safe to do this work. And I was like, the only work is figuring out what will make them feel safe. There's no other work. And that means, especially as a somatic practitioner, I was like, we get to be very creative about what that means. I've done all kinds of weird stuff with clients. I was like, do you want to be here? Do you want to hold this? Do you want to do this? It's really a creative pursuit. So I would say that to anybody, that question of how do I find safety is the question to pursue, and to do that creatively. And I mean that, how you position yourself, what you hold, where you are, on what land. These are the questions that I think the pursuit of that will open up so much more. There are things that are probably waiting to come to the surface, to be felt, experienced, but they're waiting for a place where you can feel safe in order to do it. And that may be with someone, it may be with no one, it may be, with a dog, it may be wherever it is, but get really curious about what produces that sense of safety. Notice if you do something, if a little something dislodges. Maybe not everything, it's not all or nothing. If I do this, it's something like, oh, okay, good, that's information. But that is the question.
So deeply look into the idea of what your definition of safety is?
No.
Okay. I'm glad I asked that. Man, I said I was available to be corrected. You didn't have to just do it.
Why not?
No, I'm totally
fine. No. Sorry, I did it again. Deeply feel into what produces a felt sense of safety for you. Not as an idea, not as in because then when you have an idea of what would produce safety, you end up getting lost in shoulds. This should feel safe, which is fundamentally not a creative space. But getting into the felt sense of what actually produces even an inkling, an opening towards safety, that is it. And that's what I mean, be creative about everything. Do y'all know what I mean when I'm saying be creative? I mean in position, location, and whatever. Get very, very, very creative about that and get very, 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 very curious about what safety feels like in your body. That is the fundamental question, not the idea, but the feeling.
Can I tell you what makes me feel really safe when I
would love to hear
that? Laying down on the floor.
Yeah.
Is my I just gotta lay down.
That's
not on on a bed. Like not in a place where you're supposed to lay down, on the floor.
Yeah.
In just wherever I am. I just gotta lay down. I've done it in green rooms, I've done it in my house, I've done it to the annoyance of my wife when we're having discussions. I hear what you're saying. Hold on a second, so
that's great.
But it really makes me feel like, okay, I can get through this moment.
That's great. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I feel really safe under a blanket.
Yeah. That's a
No,
blanket.
but,
A blanket
like-
on the floor. Yeah.
Sweating under there, just like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there can be a comfortable bed, and I will choose the floor.
Choose
Like
the
I'm just
floor.
like, I need to be on the floor.
That's good to know about yourself.
Yeah. Question from a member of the audience. What advice would you give an aspiring practitioner that feels called to spiritual and embodiment work, but feels societal pressure to follow a more traditional, that's in quotes, healing vocation, i.e. becoming a psychotherapist or a psychologist?
It's a great question. As someone who did that path, is this your question? Okay, cool.
So we have two people asking that same question now.
Well, I started studying somatics first, and then I was like, I gotta be legitimate. And I became a psychotherapist. So I would be legitimate. Because I was like, I can't just be like a Black queer person out here, like, I'm a somatic practitioner. You'll be like, according to who? So
that's how I feel about the title motivational speaker.
Yeah. Right. Who have I motivated?
Yeah. Why did you get qualified to motivate?
Right. So I totally understand that question of like, choosing. But I feel like we're in a different era than we were when I was kind of posing that question. I think it's much more of to me, it seems like an option to be somatic or spiritual embodiment practitioner. I think whatever you do and however, look, this path that I'm on is totally bizarre. I'm like organizer, embodiment practitioner, therapist. It's like a weird blend of things that I have just created by doing every day. But I think it's just about that. I think whatever you do, if you do it with dedication and devotion, if you do it full bodied, if you do it, I'm really around my practice. I study.
Mm-hmm.
I study and I practice and I try and I practice and I study. Sometimes we want to be practitioners or even therapists because we want to fix people or tell people what to do, or, and our curiosity gets really stunted. But I think as long as you are treating it as a craft that changes you, that grows you, that will be recognized by your community and by other people, and you will be affirmed on that path.
Oh, you got some snaps.
Hey.
Question from Chantel. You were speaking about connecting to the land as a way to foster embodiment. What if the land and the environment / climate makes it difficult to experience embodiment? I'm thinking of the Deep South, Mississippi, where my people are from.
Mm-hmm. I'm not from Mississippi. I'm from Texas, and I live in North Carolina. And so I relate to elements of this question. I was saying to my partner the other day, I was like, one of the real public health crises in where we live is white supremacy. It's like really toxic shit. And at the same time, the land didn't do it, and the land holds memories and stories and bones. But it wasn't actually the land. There's, the way I perceive it, there's kind of fog. There's some kind of haunting that hovers over the land that has to be, in a way, reckoned with and felt. But it isn't actually the land. When I moved to North Carolina and we were doing a lot of gardening there, I told the story on the podcast that I somatically had to figure out how to garden because I noticed I was overextending. I was like doing too much and I was working till my back was hurting. And I was like, that is not what I want to do on this land. Because actually the land that I was living on was part of one of the largest plantation systems in North Carolina, Stagville Plantation. And I was like, on this land, Black people and Black bodies were trained to overextend, that their limits were no longer relevant. So we had to kind of disconnect and unplug from our own body's limits in order to satisfy somebody else's hunger or greed. And I did not have that direct experience, but I also have inherited working past my own limits, working past my body's limits. That's all I've seen modeled, is working to the bone. And so I was like, that's how I was approaching it. And I was like, oh, actually, can I relate to the land in a way that allows me to be in my center, allows me to have limits? And that actually changed the relationship to the plants and how I was able to pluck something, or, what I was able to do. The relationship came into clearer view. I was like, oh, I can be really present for this because I don't have to disconnect from myself. So I think remembering that it is actually not the land actually allows the land to be an ally, and for us to be an ally to the land. And I think that's part of the reparative piece. But there is a lot of, I'm not a witchy person. Okay. Some of you maybe, I'm not. But there are some spells cast on that land. There are some spells cast, but also there are portals. And there are places where our people were fed, where they stole away, where they fell in love. They also loved pastures and made friends with trees and knew plants very well. I talk about Harriet Tubman in the book. She was a master herbalist. So we have to also call on those histories to help us re-embody our connection to those places where people try to make it hard, actually, for us to connect. I think we still have to reach for it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. We sort of have a similar talk around Harriet Tubman in my house around sort of the claiming Harriet Tubman is more of a badass instead of a tragic figure.
That's all she is.
But sort of a like she was escape. In my mind, I picture sort of a comic book hero. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
In a way that she's not like sort of portrayed in.
She's it.
Yeah.
She's it.
Yeah. I don't mean she's portrayed as trash, but like
I know.
The connection to slavery sort of makes it.
Absolutely.
Like, 20 times she went back, and
the conditions.
The way we talk about
like
nightmarish. Davy Crockett, I don't know what he did, but he's portrayed as the king of the wild frontier.
He is. He has a song.
I don't think he freed nobody from nothing, as far as I understand.
You're gonna make me dig back into the crates about Davy Crockett.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's not that sort of like.
Yeah. She is that though.
And then you also talk about Fannie Lou Hamer.
Mm-hmm.
And the same, I think about like the time I've spent in the South, and you hear about the stories of like Fannie Lou Hamer, who refused to feel separate from this state.
Yes.
Who refused to feel separate from this land.
Yes.
Who refused, like, no, this is mine.
That's right.
I demand my humanity, and I will fight for my own humanity. I love that quote about like, if I fall, I'm going to,
fall forward. That's right. And fall towards
4 inches towards liberation.
That's right.
Yeah. Question from Denmark D. Is there an act of protective resistance you suggest we can practice as multiple oppressed / marginalized people to attend to our own care in the midst of this barrage of everyday oppressive experiences?
Protective care in the midst of it all. Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about some of it, which I think some of it is community and community amongst people and non-people, but community and finding resource and being present in community. Because some I have community, but like really be there with each other, really process what is there. I think that's an element of protection. I mean, that's where the safety is. I think that we're in this moment where people have misconstrued what safety is. Safety is violence or walls or separation in their conception, but safety is community, deeply relationship connection. Individual practices. I mean, for me, everything is, well, it really depends. It really depends. I practice, I'm going to kind of go the spectrum. I practice to feel my both smallness and my power. I have to feel my vulnerability. I think, did I say this earlier? I feel like when I really felt vulnerable is when I felt most powerful. I was like, okay, this is what my true power is. And this is what our power is together. But I first had to be really vulnerable and listen. So in a way that helps me. I think I do things to feel safe and to settle, but I also do things that make me feel like a badass and like I can fight. There we are again.
Yeah, no.
I never talked about that publicly. But that also, in a way, feels protective to me. And I'd say that alongside community and processing and grieving and training our looking and witnessing, like witnessing what is really happening and the depth of it. And also remembering what is also really happening is beauty too. And I have, my child. So I'm like, I have to bear witness to this person who is growing and developing, and I have to So I think really practicing your witnessing and your looking so that you can see more of what is happening.
All right. I think this might be the last question, and then I have one more question. It's a question from Tiffany. A lot of the response to BLM in workplaces and schools got buried in DEI.
Yeah.
Often DEI trainings extract and instrumentalize BIPOC stories of racial trauma to educate white people while not providing much healing for BIPOC in return.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on how to get out of this cycle?
Well, it's probably not anything that it's not just you, Tiffany. It's like people don't want to change. People don't want to change for real. And I think that's partly what I'm trying to say in the book. It's like that is what transformation is it. That's the thing. We're alive and changing and transforming. People don't really want to change because white people know. I mean, what can we educate on at this point? There's nothing to be educated on. There's nothing more to say. There's no more information to provide. We are just playing a game and dancing when I'm like, okay, maybe this fact will do it. Maybe this figure will do it. And finally, we'll figure it out.
This infographic.
Yeah. There are no infographics. There are no facts and figures. There is no more information. There's nothing else to be said in the way of information. We're at the edge of that. There's only the willingness or the denial of transformation and changing. And that includes changing ourselves, how we are in the world, where we belong, how we conceptualize belonging, changing power, resources. There's only that remains at this point. And that's why I'm sort of talking about embodiment, because I'm like, there's no more information. Mm-hmm. There's none. There's only the doing. There's only the risking. There's only the transformation. There's only the recovery of relationship. That is the only thing that is left to do. Or, perish or something. We laugh like,
we talked about inappropriate laughter earlier and you just did it. Or it's over. Anyway, I'll be at the back signing books till the end of humanity, which could come at any moment. Yes.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of it.
We've got a snort over there.
That's kind of what time it is. It's like, are we going to do it or not?
I'm right there with you.
So, yeah, I think DEI, I haven't experienced it because I have not worked in many of those environments. I'm like, DEI in a corporate setting is such an interesting thing to me. I'm like, how far could this go?
Not very.
Not very far.
I mean, the thing I will say as someone who has been in those environments or been brought into those environments, I remember the time I remember sort of it being so clear is remember when Starbucks said we're going to close at noon so we can fix racism?
Right.
And I know some of the people who worked in that, so I'm not insulting their work.
Sure.
But it was just very clear to me that like a Starbucks in, let's say, North Dakota, their staff has a different relationship to racism than the Starbucks in Minneapolis that is run by Ethiopian refugees.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that if you're just giving them the same course,
Yeah.
you're not actually doing the work.
We're so into performance.
Yeah.
In this moment, everybody is.
And we're not all at the one. I mean, like when I last read about what is somatics, it's like some people are like, "Oh, this dude doesn't know it." You know, we're not all at the 101 level.
Yeah,
You have to recognize that in this work.
Yeah, and to me, embodiment is the opposite of performance. You know what I mean? It's not performance, and we are so compelled and recruited into performing ourselves, into performing everything. We're like, I did it, racial justice, I did it, right? You know,
I turned that IG square black,
right,
and scene,
right, and it's such a fleeting, empty way of trying to engage with change without actually trying to change it all.
Well, this next question is like this is working. The universe is conspiring. What does embodiment feel like? This is from a member of the audience. What is the biggest thing that changes or that you notice when you arrive there? Do you have any recommended embodied practice for dealing with toxic shame?
To me, embodiment feels mostly like not leaving myself or not leaving myself for too long. That mostly I live in me, I dwell in me. And the place where I come from is kind of down and back in me. And I live from that place as much as I can. And when I leave it, then I try to figure out, oh, why did I leave it? And then get back there as soon as I can. Embodiment is living. I would say in the beginning of this work that what I was really invested in is my people being able to live and experience their lives. And all people to be able to live and experience their lives. In my life, so a lot of people live and, they live and they breathe and they don't get to live. I had a podcast guest, Vivian Sansour, is a seed keeper, Palestinian seed keeper, and she was telling me how she feels actually so alive in this moment. She feels like her people are also living in a way. They're present to their lives and what life is and being in our lives. And I think that to me is what embodiment is. I'm here. I'm here. I'm present as much as I can. Sometimes it feels awesome. Sometimes it feels like a mix of things. Sometimes it feels deeply awkward and uncomfortable and painful. It feels like everything that I feel. You know what I mean?
And do you have any recommended embodied practices for dealing with toxic shame?
Oh, yeah. I'm smiling because I'm kind of thinking about the story that people have been asking me to tell about how I started to do work around love and loving myself, and I would sing Whitney Houston songs to myself, dedicated to myself, and I'd really be like, saving all my love for you, singing to myself.
Do you want to sing the whole song right now?
Not really.
Okay.
No. Nobody wants that, probably. You're like, nice, Prentis. But I think things like that speak back to you. And speaking in a way, not just to kind of say things, but figuring out how to say things in a way that they start to sink in to your skin and less of you is refuting them. So I think that is one element of it. I think looking at it always helps to kind of look at what is the story that's lodged here? How is it lodged here? What does it do? Because stories will produce a posture, a breath pattern, a way of being, and getting curious about the kind of constellation of how does this shame show up in me? Where does it get activated? Mapping it is really helpful for me because once I kind of map what happens, sometimes I can map my way back out.
What has been most beneficial to your healing as a queer Black person? Question from Mad.
Remembering how divine I am. You know. And remembering it because I already knew that, way back in the day. I know it about all of you. I know it about me. And just, knowing that the world tells stories about, I think I talk about this in the book too, about who is in a way close to God, like that's the myth of supremacy. These set of human beings are somehow closer. But I think I knew a long time ago that no human could tell a story about me in that way. And that no human could tell that kind of story about any of us. And I don't know, I think I just know that. And even the way, being a Black and queer person is deeply important to me. It's just also a way into my own feeling and everything and connection to you. It's not even a special thing in my reality. It's not even a special thing, but it's like, oh, this is the way that I had to find my way back to wholeness through a bunch of lies and stuff.
So this is the last question. It's not, and this is the perfect last question to end on. Just to remember the audience. So good job, whoever wrote this question, or whoever assembled these questions in this order. It's a community effort. What do you think is the most important call to action for us as individuals to best support healing in our communities? The Bay Area crowd likes homework, as you know, especially this type of crowd. They want some action items.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, you got a thumbs up.
Yeah.
They like homework.
You want something to do?
They don't want they don't want vibes. I mean, they like vibes.
The Bay Area loves vibes.
The Bay Area is built on vibes.
So many vibes. Yeah,
but then it became vibes with an action list.
Yeah. I think one place to look at is, thinking of ourselves. I talk about in the book, and we talk about the Embodiment Institute transformational characters. And we're using this term to talk about people who are taking on healing in whatever kind of systems they are embedded, family systems, community systems, organizational institutions. And so getting clear about how you're already inside of so many systems. And that means that you are benefiting and responsible to those. So if you're a therapist, and I say this in the book, if you're a therapist, you're a part of wherever you're doing therapy. If you're doing it at a clinic, that is one side of power for you and one side of change for you. If you're part of organizations around being a therapist, that is one side of power, one side of change for you. If you are a Black person or a white person, it's like these are all places where you can do something and change something. And those places all are your responsibility. So I would say, look closely at what you're already a part of and what you're already doing, what you're already contributing to, what's already feeding you and sourcing you. And remember that you're responsible. The other thing is if you're trying to do something community level, you ain't doing it by yourself. So getting clear about who you're doing it with, that's called organizing. So organizing yourself, finding like-minded, where two or more are gathered, there's an organization. No.
Prentis Hemphill, everybody.
Thanks, Joe.
Prentis Hemphill. There will be a book signing over there. You can buy a book over here. Give a round of applause to CIIS here for letting us do this. Thank you, everybody.